Deputy Speaker, I present the report of the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Environment and Energy's inquiry into the Climate Change National Framework for Adaptation and Mitigation Bill 2020 and the related Consequential and Transitional Provisions Bill. Climate change is one of the world's most challenging and complex areas when it comes to public policy, and that includes here in Australia. What is often left unrecognised amidst the growing ambition to decarbonise Australia's economy is our strong track record in emissions reduction and also in emissions accounting and reporting. The evidence that came before the committee in this inquiry bore these facts out. Australia is not only meeting and beating its international obligations, but is on track to beat its 2030 emissions reduction target, and work is already being done to determine a longer-term emissions reduction pathway in line with our commitment to achieving net zero as soon as possible and preferably by 2050. Australia's reporting and accountability framework is world-leading, providing quarterly reporting on emissions, annual forecasts and an annual low-emissions technology statement. However, no area of public policy is without room for improvement, and the climate change bills proposed by the member for Warringah was welcomed by the committee as a contribution to the discussion. The committee, as it always does, diligently considered the proposed bills and the evidence that came before it from those who made submissions and appeared before the committee as witnesses. In its report, the committee has commended positive aspects of the bills, including requirements to consult with experts and the community in framing future climate policies, and the importance of ensuring fair employment transition for those industries and workers impacted by change. The committee also supported better utilising the Climate Change Authority as an expert advisor to government and working towards even greater clarity of future emission reduction plans in advance of this year's United Nations COP26 conference. At the same time, however, the committee's inquiry identified deficiencies in the proposed bills. Let me outline just three. Firstly, the bills proposed a climate change commission which would steer formal policy decisions away from the Parliament and the Executive to an unelected body. Our system of liberal democracy is well recognised as one of the most mature and well-functioning in the world, and it is imperative that its integrity be maintained. No matter how difficult it is to meet the substantive and political challenges of climate change, we parliamentarians cannot shirk our responsibility to determine the national response. What's more, the Australian people should not be stripped of their right to choose between alternative policy positions at the ballot box. Their voice, the people's voice, especially on an issue as important as climate change, must be protected. Secondly, the proposed Climate Change Commission would replicate work already being done by the federal bureaucracy, including by the Climate Change Authority, and the bills, if they were passed and enacted, would place additional and potentially inappropriate reporting burdens on other Commonwealth agencies. Thirdly, the proposed requirement to reach net zero emissions by 2050 by legislative force without recognising the importance of addressing the question of how such targets can be achieved would give rise to a series of risks across the economy, specific sectors, and also the jobs of hard-working everyday Australians. Deputy Speaker, does this mean that net zero should not be considered or pursued? No. No, it doesn't. Indeed, the Australian government has already committed to achieving net zero as soon as possible and preferably by 2050. But it would be irresponsible for a government to legislate for such a hard target on the what and the when without due consideration for the how. And it is for reasons such as these, Deputy Speaker, that the committee has recommended that the bills not be passed. Climate change is a global problem that can only be solved with a global solution. Australia is making its contribution, a strong contribution. And as we continue to do so, we should have confidence that our climate objectives can and should be achieved using our existing, proven, world-class climate policy architecture. In a liberal democracy like Australia's, it would be unrealistic, dare I say naive, to expect a national consensus to emerge where everyone agrees on one specific suite of policies to tackle the issue of climate change. And that's not a bad thing, I suggest, Deputy Speaker. You see, liberalism and its two tenets of democracy and capitalism are a strength, not a weakness, when it comes to tackling a challenge as intractable as climate change. It's what allows open debate on public policy, and it's what allows enterprise to consider new and emerging technologies. Can I lastly, Deputy Speaker, thank my colleagues on the committee from the Liberal, National and the Labor parties, along with the crossbench who actively participated in and brought a critical lens to this inquiry, and I pay tribute, of course, to the ever-capable committee secretariat. I commend the report to the House.